They say justice is blind, sometimes so's the lawyers. That's terrible. We're moving on anyway. She-Hulk, penultimate episode of, I want to say the season. I don't know if they've confirmed that there's going to be another season or not. Well, penultimate episode of what we know we're getting so far. So this is the one that brings in Daredevil, which is something that we've actually known for a little bit because they put that in earlier marketing and revealed it already. Kinda would have preferred if they hadn't, but here we are. I mentioned at the tail end of the review I did last week that I really liked that episode. And I was nervous moving forward because the show hadn't been great for me up to that point, and I worried that the previous episode was going to end up as a blip of stuff that was much more in line with what I was hoping to get out of the show, and then it was just going to go back to middling, at least to my hopes for it. If other people have been liking it more than me up to this point, that's fine. I'm just talking about where it's landing for me. Thankfully, though, that didn't happen because I really like this episode for a number of reasons. And it also was a better viewing experience than last time because you'll remember I said last time I really liked that episode, but only once it was done and I was positive it wasn't going to do any of the things I was afraid it was going to do because of the setup that it had made for itself. So this one I actually got to enjoy in the moment a lot more. There's a couple of fantastic singular gags. I deeply, deeply enjoyed Daredevil doing the walk of shame. I not only did I burst out laughing, I laughed through that entire shot of him walking across the screen. And it really, really tickled me. It's a small thing. It's a tiny thing. And the fact that he had his shoes in his hand. It's just this little moment, but it's like, that's perfect. You know what I feel like, and I'm trying to think of how to say this without sounding condescending. I'm going to do my best. If I come across as condescending, apologies up front. But I feel like this is an episode where, for me at least, the fact that this is a predominantly female-led production and a female-led writer's room really, really becomes a massive strength of the show. I don't want to say that's been a weakness of the show up to that point, but this specifically, there are a number of things that I can point to and definitely go, a male writer's room would absolutely not have done that or would not have done that way. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is that walk of shame feels like a perfect example of something like that. And it's not like I haven't felt, the feminine input up to this point, but this episode also is lacking some of the stuff that was pulling me out of it, such as the fact that they clearly didn't have a legal consultant. Now, the stuff that happens in court this time may not be much more legally sound than what had happened before, but it was missing a lot of the glaring, that would never happen, and that's not how any of that works, moments that had happened in a lot of the previous courtroom scenes. Yes, realistically, the back and forth that happens between the lawyers wouldn't have happened specifically in that setting, but the arguments brought up, again, to me as someone who is not a lawyer, they made a heck of a lot more sense than a lot of the stuff that had been said in court before. And this particular character of Leapfrog also struck me as the exact kind of guy who wouldn't sit down and shut up, but would stand up and cook his own goose. Because, the client should shut the hell up, but he's absolutely the kind of guy who would just go off and just make everything worse for himself. So the courtroom scene felt much better grounded, or at least was, as I said, was lacking in a lot of the stuff that had really pulled me out of those scenes before, moments that I was like, wait a minute. And so, whereas up to this point, a lot of the stuff around, playing around with Jen being a female superhero, not really wanting to be a superhero, wanting to be more of a lawyer, but how that impacts, and it actually kind of comes up here where she's like a female lawyer of the year, but there's like 5 of them, but she just has to suck that up and deal with it. I would say like there were times before this that I was like, that's being handled really well because it's being handled by people who understand the perspective that this should be taking on it. I brought that up before with the I forget what they were called. The online forum, whatever it is. When that first got introduced, I was like, that's coming at it very much along the lines of how this stuff actually goes down. And when that comes up back again at the end of this, honestly, it's perfect. And it's perfect in a way that I would have been deeply shocked if it had come out of a male-centric writer's room. I'm not going to say that a male-centric writer's room could not have done it this well, but I would have been very surprised if it had. So that's kind of what I mean when I say I'm feeling really the strength of this writer's room in this episode especially. So what do I mean by it being really good, how that goes down? Well, here's what really rings true about it in terms of these online nonsense, BS, anti-woman, misogynistic campaigns of hate that, again, as depicted here, is incredibly reflective of how it goes down in reality. Slightly exaggerated in terms of actually hacking and taking over a presentation screen at an event. That is the heightened part of it. But like, as far as the rest of it goes, they hate her. And they have all these nonsense, misogynistic reasons for hating her. Some of them rationalize reasons other than misogyny. Some just fully roll with it. It doesn't really matter. And ultimately, how they try to quote-unquote destroy her is by invading her privacy and bringing up literally nothing that should be relevant to anybody's opinion of her as a lawyer or as a hero. Because the fact that she went on some dates and that they managed to completely sneakily and illegally end up with a sex tape of her, that has no bearing on anything to do with her professional life, her public life, her life as a superhero. All that does is prove how disgusting these people are. But they put it out there anyways because they honestly believe that if women can be shown to be anything other than absolutely perfect, everyone will abandon them because that is how little these men think of women. And they think everyone else thinks just as little of them. So the way in which they try to destroy her, incredibly accurate to the kind of things that goes on in the worst versions of these sorts of hate campaigns. This very much mirrors stuff like Gamergate and the movements, quote unquote, that predated that and have followed in its wake. And it also handles Jen's reaction perfectly. Because she's upset, she has more than every right to be pissed off at what has just happened and been done to her. But by displaying that anger, by showing that this gets to her, which of course it does, she's a human being and they did something horrible to her, the eye gets turned on her and people flee from her. They are judging her in the moment because she had a very understandable emotional reaction to a horrible thing that these freaking guys did to her. Suddenly the focus is about her reaction and how emotional she got and is no longer about the insane level of invasion of privacy and criminality that was committed against her. Now all the focus is on how upset she is. And that gets counted by these jackasses who underwent all this as them winning. Now, we'll see how this pans out in the ultimate episode and if it can fully stick the landing. But as far as execution of a moment of what they try and do and the immediate response to someone having, again, an incredibly understandable response to having something like that done to them is so good. And so spot on, and so just not what I would expect to see depicted. Again, largely because most of these shows and most things at this level of budget, etc., tend to have male-centric writing rooms, and I would not expect this level of insight from them. This is nailing what it is choosing to tackle absolutely perfectly. And even before that, The rest of the episode is good to great. Some bits are a little bit more, I still don't love the designer, like, as a character. He feels like a stock character to me. I just don't particularly enjoy him. Leapfrog was enjoyably jackass-esque. I did appreciate, and this kind of ties into what I said before about the scene in the courtroom working way better for me here than it did in most of the previous episodes. I appreciate that the idea of a hero wanting to sue the person who made his suit because it didn't hold up to the standards that he was told the suit would hold up to. That's a good, unique kind of case that would appear in a superhero situation that is close enough to a real-world style lawsuit, but is unique to a superhero world. That's, again, kind of what I wanted to see more of in terms of the courtroom stuff. It is grounded just enough in actual types of cases that get brought, but just in the Marvel way. So I enjoyed that quite a bit. Daredevil was good. He was fine. They do have pretty good chemistry. It did, and it still does a little bit. I get why they didn't, because it would have been hard to do this without her like already knowing that it's Matt Murdock under there or what have you. But like, I was a little bit surprised that in like a meta joke or a fourth wall break, she didn't at some point go, "Oh, he's from that other series. Oh yeah, I forgot that those were a thing." Or, even express confusion like, wait, are those canon now? Or something like that. I kind of expected something like that to happen. It didn't. Again, given the way that they chose to have the reveal of Daredevil being Matt, that revealed to Jen. Like, I understand that the kind of jokes that I would have expected from the setup don't really gel with that, so it would have required a reworking. I still was a little bit surprised. That having been said, the meta joke and the fourth wall break towards the end was very well done, where she's like, this feels like an ending, doesn't it? Why are we still going? Oh, is the next episode the finale? Are we about to get a twist? This feels like we're about to get a twist. Like, again, like the better fourth wall breaks that have gone on, it is much more aware of this, not just as a piece of fiction, but specifically as a show, and addressing it with things that are much more specific to the television format. So again, one of the better fourth wall breaks, kind of along with, I'm not sure it's quite as good as the one from last episode where she called out the previously on for glossing over somebody. But it's probably the second best fourth wall break. This overall is a really good episode. It's a really, really good way to get me very much invested in what happens from here. I want to see how this plays out. And I have now not utter confidence, because as I said, the front half of the show was for me in a lot of ways, but seeing how well they're nailing what they are choosing to make sort of the final story arc of this thing, I have a pretty decent amount of confidence that the finale is going to be good. And that feels good, because I've had a lot of frustration with this series. I've had a lot of annoyance personally in that it just wasn't taking the angle or doing the aspects of the character that I would have preferred. And as someone who is a fan of this character and is a fan specifically of a lot of the material that this particular adaptation is pulling from, it was just frequently frustrating. And I'm not going to say that like earlier episodes were bad. They had opted to do a focus and an angle and an approach to the material that was not to my taste. I think looking back on it, they did what they chose to do fairly well. It just wasn't clicking with me. But as we've gotten towards the tail end, it has landed on and started to develop and really do the things that I had hoped more of the show would be. But even coming in at this tail end, I'm really happy to be getting what we're getting. Last episode, this episode, and I'm very hopeful for the next one. So, yeah. This, 3 or so episodes back, I was just bummed. Because I'd wanted to love this series so much, and I just thought, well, I'll see out this season, but it's just not going to happen. But now, we've had 2 episodes in a row that are almost that are incredibly close to what I had wanted the whole time. And that feels really good. I would have liked to have had that feeling earlier, but now that I've got it, I'm like, thank you. Like, better late than never. I'm really happy, and I'm really excited for the finale. She-Hulk. Penultimate episode, episode 8. I can remember things. I know numbers. What did you think about this? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon's what pays my bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't do that, likes, shares, subscribes, those also do help a fair amount. But even if you can't do any of those, don't worry too much about it. We try and take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. All right, time to thank my highest supporting patrons. Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Emu Delkey, Leotha Boyd, Toy Loli, Becky Sparks, Phrenobulax, The Poodle, Zach, Bookworm, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperol, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Shayla Gourlay, Brendan LaRose, and TT. Thank you for your support. If you want to hear me try and say your name while this little guy tries to chew on my earrings, well, you can check out the Patreon for the support tiers that get you a shout out. Thanks so much. You are a pain in my butt.